Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. We're excited to get started with another training for LED Wizard 8. I know that we've had a really great response over the past couple of weeks from you all with what we've been doing, so we're excited to bring this to y'all. Please just let me know you can hear me by sending over a message in the questions tab. Let us know where you're listening from today. My name is Lauren Conaway. I'm the marketing manager at Principal LED, and we also have Jeff Bassett on the line, and he's going to be doing the training for you all today. So please feel free to send over those questions, and we will answer those, if not immediately, as we go throughout the training today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
All right, thank you very much, Lauren. Want to make sure that everybody can see my main screen here. I just have my title slide up. Is that what you're seeing, Lauren?
Looks great.
Okay. So hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for joining today. This is the third LED Wizard training that we've done as part of the Wednesday Wizardry series. And today we're talking about file import and data cleanup, which is a really important topic. And I've got a lot of material and some files to go through today. So as Lauren mentioned, please put your questions through the chat. I'll try to answer them as best I can as we go through. So this is what I have as the agenda today. So I'll do a couple quick introductions. We'll talk about the import dialog box and import crop. And then most of the time we'll spend in the data cleanup tool. So I'll introduce that tool and what's part of that. We'll talk about grouping and combining, how you organize your artwork prior to going into PowerFlow. And we did talk about that on the PowerFlow webinar that we did, but I'll go ahead and add some more thoughts to that. And then finally, vector editing tools. So after you import, if there's any additional work needed on your data, we'll talk about vector editing tools. So as I do each week, I'll list here what we're not talking about, which I have to do because we're just trying to keep this focused to certain topics. So again, I mentioned that this is the third one we've done. So PowerFlow was the first one, and there's a recording of that. Last week we did sign cabinets and cloud signs. Next week we're doing the production edition, another great topic to definitely you want to join that one. The following week we don't have a training. Instead we're doing an announcement of our partnership with Crotech, and there'll be a webinar on that day, on that Wednesday. And Crotech is a partner of ours that's in the RGB space. Those guys are doing really great work, and we'll be talking about how we're going to work together. The weekend after that, we're doing stats and title blocks, another good topic, and I'll talk about customization of that and the kind of data and the workflow. Week after that, May 13th, power supply loading, another good topic, and there are several options in the software for power supply loading. And then finally on May 20th, vectorizing, on-screen digitizing, and freehand drawing. So this is actually one that I just added because I realized that today I wouldn't have enough time to cover this today, but this is really focused on bitmaps and photographs as your artwork, okay, and how to handle those. Whereas today we'll be focusing exclusively on vector artwork and how to clean up vector artwork. Okay, so that's basically the schedule. So in terms of what we're talking about today, file import, data cleanup, this is really an important task in the software. We have to be able to import almost any design file, make a clean layout out of that file. It's, as I say here, perhaps the hardest challenge in the software because this is so open-ended, right? The files that you all get from your customers, or the files that you create, there's a lot of different file formats. These files come from a lot of different programs. I mentioned, vector files versus raster files versus photos. It's a huge range, and you all know this because you're doing it every day. the quality of the file varies. Again, today we'll go through a number of examples. Sometimes there's missing information. Sometimes you have a file that doesn't have a scale on it, or vectors that aren't connected, or what's the depth, right, is the most common thing that I think is missing sometimes from artwork. In some cases, we only need a small subset of a design file. In fact, that's very common, that we don't have to import the entire file. Sometimes you have multi-page, I've seen 100-page PDFs, right, of different designs and sizes and things for a big program. So this is the task today. Again, it's a big ask of the software to handle anything, and certainly that's what we're striving to do. So I made this little table, and I think it's a good way to introduce file formats and programs. So let me just kind of go through this. Down the left side, we have the various formats, which I think are the most common. And in terms of vector files, we'll talk about today: AI, EPS, DXF, and PDF. And I think those 4 formats really cover, I'll say 90% or plus of the files that you'll see. PDF itself should certainly be more than half of the formats that you'll see. So PDF is, in my comments, I say preferred. PDF really is the preferred format and the most common format, partly because it supports vectors and bitmaps, right? You can have an image and you can have a vector drawing together in a PDF. And but the flip side of that is sometimes you have a PDF and it doesn't have any vectors. It's just a bitmap, and you may think that it's a vector file, and it may not be. So that's one of the gotchas with PDF. AI and EPS kind of go together. A lot of programs will support importing and exporting of AI and EPS. AI is native to Illustrator, but it's a common format across the industry. DXF is a CAD format. It's mostly associated with AutoCAD, and there are a lot of flavors of DXF, which makes DXF a little bit perhaps confusing at times. Lines and arcs really are what we like to see. DXF can be all lines. They can be lines and arcs. It can be what's called exploded data, and I'll explain that with a couple examples today. So if you have a PSD, a JPEG, or a PNG, these are bitmap formats, and that's what we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. Even though a PSD file can also have vectors, but we don't preserve those. We just take it as a bitmap. And then down at the bottom, I have sign programs. A lot of the sign programs out there that you might be using as a front end for design, probably also supports these formats, most of these. And in the comment, I say, use older formats. Some of these formats change frequently, too frequently, in my opinion. So sometimes you can back save to an older version of that format, and that's generally a good idea. It's a little bit probably more consistent in terms of being able to maintain compatibility. And then the final comment here, we always prefer a vector file to a bitmap file as it relates to making layouts in LED Wizard. We can handle bitmaps, and again, we have various tools, but really a vector file at the end of the day is what you need if you're going to be, routing out backs and producing this stuff. So we prefer a vector file. Some customers don't know the difference, and I'll talk about that later as far as going back to your customer and asking for a different type of file. Okay, so in the software, we have, of course, the import dialog box, and in that import dialog box, if you click on the format button down here, it says all files. Here's even more formats that that we support. And some of these are around different LD Wizard formats and this sort of thing. But there are actually additional listings here of formats. And there are also some import filters. And I just wanted to mention these because sometimes you'll have a file that doesn't seem to import the way that it looks or the way that you expect. And there are some filters here in addition to import crop, which is on the next slide. There are options to skip bitmaps, and generally we have it on to skip bitmaps. It's again, normally we don't need them or want them, and I'll show examples of that. Skip gradients is generally a good idea as well. A gradient is rarely beneficial in our task here. Strip out coincident loops is also normally on. So you can have a file that has a coincident loop is just multiple loops in exactly the same location. And you see that on files where there's like a stroke or there's a fill or there's multiple strokes and outlines and inlines and things like this sometimes, but we don't need those. We just need a single loop. So this is a tool that takes those out. Reorder loops should always be on, and that's just a filter that we use. Clipping paths are associated with gradients, so normally we want to skip those. So just a few different options. PDF, multi-page PDF is another option, and you can scroll back and forth. So those are just some filters. Sometimes a file comes to us and I say, well, if you skip gradients or this sort of thing, then you can get that file in a little bit more successfully. So the actual import dialog box here, this is what it looks like, and the first thing that we provide here is the ability to crop into a design file. And this is actually a big deal because there's a lot of information on one of these design files that we don't really need in terms of the task that we have, which is making our layout. So here we've got this Pepsi job, and it has the title block of the sign company. It has a artist rendition photograph. We don't need that. We don't really need the notes, and we can read this stuff, but we don't need it to import the file. So I just crop right in here, and I'll show you this exact file. And then this is all that I import. It's faster. It results in less data, coming into the software. So you just draw a box, and if you draw it poorly or change your mind, you just draw it again. It's a pretty simple interface. You do need to fully enclose a loop, so you want to make sure you get outside. And a lot of times, I'll also include the dimensions, include the scale here, because that's critical to the next step that we'll get into. So I often do that as well. But you don't need the title block or the photo or anything. Now, if you have a bitmap file, cropping doesn't work for a bitmap. So you'll get the error that says that. And that's one way to know if you have a bitmap, right? Sometimes on a PDF, you might not be sure, but import crop will tell you right away if it's just a bitmap. Okay, so that's step number one. Let's get that file cropped and bring that file in. Now, when you have a new layout in LED Wizard and you import a file, it's going to go through the data cleanup tool. Okay, and this is really the primary thing to talk about today. And there's a lot of different options here. And really what this tool is a collection of multiple tools that we had in our prior version that's all in a single interface. So there's a lot that you can do here to get your file in. Okay, the first thing is we have an extraction tool, and this lets us select just the items that we want to keep. Okay, so in a sense, it's the opposite of cropping, but a lot of times when you crop, you still end up with a lot of extra stuff that you don't need. And I'll show you an example of a neon retrofit file that's very busy, and we just want to select the letters. So we have a tool to select the items, and at the same time, you can scale. Okay, so you can, most of these files are page size, and so you can scale and say, okay, I want the letter height to be 24 inches. And we also have a ruler interface, a ruler option here. If you need to measure something within the layout, let's say you don't have an overall measurement, an overall scale on the vertical or horizontal, we can scale something within the layout, and I'll show you that. There's an unexplode tool, which is here, and I mentioned the idea of exploded data. So this is a DXF file that is exploded into individual objects. Individual vectors are their own object, and they're not connected to the adjacent vector. Now, they might share a start endpoint, but they're actually not connected. And so that's a very tricky format. But we have a tool that will connect those, and I'll show you how that works. So that's a really nice, because these files can be very difficult. So that's a nice tool. So once you've selected everything, you've scaled it, and you've unexploded if necessary, you click on extract and scale, and then that sort of brings up the second row of options here. And these are all what we call global vector editing tools. Okay, so these are 4 different options. There's kind of 3 because there's rasterize, vectorize, round, and sharp. And then there's recreate with Bezier curves and optimize vectors, which converts to lines and arcs. I'll talk about that here in a minute as well. So basically, once you extract that file and you can now see it and it's scaled to the correct size, you actually see all the vector points, which is what the vector handles option is. And you can look at that file and say, okay, I want to recreate with Bezier curves, or I want to rasterize and revectorize it, or I want to use optimized vectors. And you can test these out and then do reset cleaning, and you can see, well, do I improve the quality of that file? Did I make it worse? Is there no difference? And these here, these 3, these are separate tools that are available in the software, and we just put it here in this interface. So you can clean up, you can smooth out, and then click on done. So that's the basic procedure. And you can also assign letters in this interface as well, which is useful for stats. So that's the basic workflow. And I have 7 files today that I want to go through, and it's a consistent workflow through the software in terms of this process. So what that workflow looks like is, again, select what we want, and we can select by color, and I'll show you that actually on this file. Enter a width or a height, unexplode if necessary, extract and scale, select the global cleanup tool, and click on done. So this might seem a little repetitive, but as I go through the files, you'll see that there's a procedure here that once you get comfortable with, this can go very quickly. And here's a couple files, samples of a couple files that I'll use today. So I mentioned grouping and combining. So and I did talk about this before, but just to clarify, a group is a temporary selection of objects. Okay, you can group a set of objects by drawing a box around them in the layout tool, and you can just as easily then ungroup those objects. Combining is more permanent. If I select this surf shop lettering and combine, it actually makes one object out of that surf shop. It's one object instead of multiple letters. Okay, and so if you have something grouped, you can ungroup. If you have something combined, you can then break into loops or break into outer loops. And that is how you can decompose something that's combined. So combining is generally thought of as something more permanent, but you can break that down into its individual loops as well. And I've mentioned exploded data. Loop directions are very important to PowerFlow. So for example, here we have this internal on the O is counterclockwise. You'll notice on the surf shop that those internal loops are not red. And this is another problem of many problems with this particular file. It doesn't have the correct loop directions. And so that is something that as part of this process that we'll fix. Okay, so that's kind of grouping and combining. And I mentioned last time that you want to go into PowerFlow with a group of objects that you intend to use a certain module for. So if I'm looking at this IMO twins file, I might use a different module for this this big arrow than I would for these letters, right? And if that's the case, I would select the lettering, go into PowerFlow, then I'd select the arrow, go into PowerFlow. Maybe I'd use sticks for this, for example. So that's where grouping is important when you go into PowerFlow. And actually this file, I'll explain what's wrong with this file, is that these letters are oddly grouped. I have a one letter from the top and one letter from the bottom in a group, which is not the proper organization for these letters. So I'll show that. So the infamous question, what could go wrong? Well, it turns out that there are various things that can go wrong in importing files. You might import a file, it might have missing data. You might import and something, a certain section is missing or something like that. So you could try different import filters, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. You could try not using import crop at all. Sometimes files have bounding boxes and objects and things that go off the screen. In some cases, just not import cropping at all sometimes gets a file in. And you can also copy and paste, by the way, out of CorelDRAW, Adobe Illustrator, and other design programs. So sometimes you don't need to import and export at all. You can just copy and paste. And so that's another, if you're really comfortable with Corel, let's say, and you do all your pre-processing of your artwork in Corel, you can do that, select what you want, copy and paste through the Windows clipboard, paste it into a blank LED Wizard layout, and off you go. Okay, so that's another option. You could have a file that doesn't import at all. We actually had one within Principal LED yesterday. Turns out my final point, it was just a bad file. It was an empty file, and it's not our fault or the software's fault if the original file is bad. But in some cases, you might have to try a different format. So that laundry list of formats that I mentioned does not include CDR, which is a native CorelDRAW format, or DWG, which is the native AutoCAD format. So sometimes we see these formats that we don't support. So you might just go back to that program and say, okay, I'll export as a DXF instead. Okay. Sometimes if we have a problem with the file, you might try to open that in Illustrator, let's say. Right? Illustrator is a terrific program for problem files, let's say. Right? They're very good at opening enormous files or files that have errors or things like that. And once you have it open there, you can copy and paste it, you can re-export it. So not a bad idea to have another design program. It could be your standard sign program, might also play this role. And if you have a problem with the file, you can always send it to our team, right? Send it to our layouts team. Our team has various tools and skills and programs and things that can help. And sometimes files end up to me and I help out and we try to get it open. Here's a potential error message. This is you can see it's a CDR file, invalid file format. So again, because of the task here of supporting such a wide range of files, sometimes we have issues like that. Okay, just real quick before I get into the software. So one of the tasks that you might be faced with in some files is vector editing, and I hope to have time at the end to talk about some of this. But vector editing just means you go into the vector edit tool, which is the second tool on the left side in the toolbox, and in this mode, you can see the individual vectors. A plus sign is a tangent vector. A black box is a non-tangent vector. If you double click, you get this little menu, and you can see the various options here in this menu. So, I don't think you have to do this frequently, but it's certainly good to know the tools and to know how our vector edit tools work. I think they're pretty standard. They're pretty straightforward. There is one tool that I want to highlight, and that's called alt smoothing. And it's just one of those things that, for whatever reason, a lot of people don't know about, but it's a really terrific tool. So the way that this works is, let's say that you have a section here that you want to reduce the number of points here. Okay, this could be just to smooth it out. It could be that this file is going to your channel letter bending machine. It's going to your router. Maybe you want to just have fewer points along here. So what you do is you click on the first point, you hold the Alt key on the keyboard, you click on the end point, and all the points in between will be deleted and replaced by a single arc. Okay, so if you hold the Alt key down and you just click around the artwork, each time that you click, you're creating a new single vector. So the end point of the prior arc becomes the start point of the next arc. Okay, and pretty efficiently you can go around and clean up artwork that way. And I'll show you how this works. Okay, so that's what I'd like to what I'll start with. Final thoughts here before I get into the software. Everything that we're doing today and in the steps that I've explained is just to get your file ready for population. Okay, we want it to be scaled. We want our data rules to be followed in terms of loop directions. We want good quality. It doesn't have to be perfect quality, right? Good quality in order to get a good layout. And don't be afraid to go back to your customer. And I say this frequently. The customer, again, just as easily could have given you a PDF had they known that that's the format that you wanted. They may not have realized that it was just a bitmap. So a little education of the customer is not a bad thing. I don't know if anybody does this. We'll charge you a data cleanup fee. That's I don't know that a lot of shops like to do that, but certainly at some point, if you're spending a lot of time cleaning up our work, it's something that you might suggest. Have a legal disclaimer too. If you give us a poor photograph, we're going to do the best we can to create artwork that's at the proper scale. Okay, so let me get out of here, go into the software. Lauren, are there any questions? I'll take a quick pause here.
No questions right now.
All right, terrific. So let's go ahead and click on the import tool, and this is the import dialog box that I mentioned. And why don't we start with this one? So I actually have mostly PDFs, and again I have these 7 files. And when I click on a PDF, it's going to give me a preview. If I have the show preview checkbox here, while I'm down here, these are the arrows if you have a multi-page PDF and you want to scan back and forth through the pages, or you can type a page number. So in this case, if I draw my crop box, I can do this here and maintain the dimensions. In this case, I can't read that from here, so that's my crop. These are the filters that I mentioned. So I have skip bitmaps, gradients. I think these are the way that I suggested in that slide. So different filters. Okay, but I'll click on import. This is that list of file formats. Okay, if I do all, then it just shows up everything. So I'll click on import, and so this is how my file looks. And you can see that as I go around here, I'm actually selecting each object. Okay, so when I select something, that means that it's an object that I want to keep. Okay, and I can do that by drawing a box. If I change my mind, I click it again is kind of a toggle. So I can click on each one, or I can draw a box like that. Okay, and in this case, for some reason, I came in and it didn't land into the tool. but that's fine. So I went back in the tool by clicking on F11, and F11 is the data prep tool. So for some reason that file just came straight in and didn't land in the tool, but normally it lands and you get this interface, and this was the tool that I showed before. So so again, same thing, click this, select this, okay, and this is the artwork that that I'm interested to keep. Okay, now you can see here that I've got my my new height, and I could do new width, so I could measure by any of these metrics, and this is actually in metric. This is millimeters. So I'm just gonna make a guess. 1 meter is about, what is it, 38 inches or something like that. Okay, so that becomes my new height. So I'm taking the overall height and I'm entering it here. And I can only do one of these. I can't do both. So it scales the other dimension. I mentioned unexplode, and unexplode comes with some options here for values. And this is really, I'll talk about this here in a minute, but this normally auto is really all you need to do here. But I'm not going to do unexplode this time because this artwork doesn't need it. So I'll click on now extract and scale. And you can see that I've scaled up. So here's my original size down here. And I've scaled up, and it's only the objects that I've selected. And you can see the nodes here. Okay, so these are you know, the actual points that make up the vectors. And here on this O, you know, I have pretty big, these are Bezier curves, I believe. I don't think these are arcs. So I have pretty big Bezier curves here. If I click on recreate with Bezier curves, it actually puts more Bezier curves in, which I sort of prefer. I don't always like to see really gigantic Bezier curves. So I change that. If I don't like that, I can click on reset cleaning. I could then do optimize vectors. Now I mentioned that optimize vectors is arcs and lines. Okay, so often you'll see more points if you go from Bezier curves to arcs and lines. You know, it's not a bad plan to use optimized vectors here if you're ending up exporting this file to your router, if you're exporting it to your bending machine, because those files need to be arcs and lines anyway. Okay, so you can do that here, cleans up these lines, and I'll now say done, and I'll say that's you know, that's what I wanted. Okay, so if I turn colors off, I've got this. Let me ungroup. Ungroup again. Oh, actually, in this case, it did correctly break this into loops. But originally, what this file looked like is, you know, this was an object, and you know, this was an object, and you don't want your artwork to be organized that way. You want it to be individual letters like this. Okay, so for example, I might organize this where I've got one line of text, 2 lines of text. I might go into PowerFlow maybe with these 2 objects together, and then I would go into PowerFlow separately for this artwork. Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward one. I'm going to clean up and do a new file, and let's see, this one is interesting because I'm going to use the ruler to scale this up. So here's Metro Mission Valley. I've got a lot of other drawings and things. I don't need those, but I will take the dimensions here. And the challenge with this artwork is I have an overall dimension. Okay, 10 feet, 9 feet. 10 feet 9 inches is my overall size, but this outline is kind of various points. I don't really need that. So I'm going to use the ruler as a way to properly scale this. Okay, so first I'm going to draw a box around Mission Valley. Those are dotted red. That means those are objects that I'm keeping. Metro. Of course, I can also just click, right? So I click. So this is the artwork that I want. Okay, And I don't immediately have a clean way to scale this unless I select all of that outside stuff, which I don't really want to do. But I will bring in a guideline. So guidelines are useful in this context, and the guideline actually snaps to that vector. Guidelines are useful here because I can now put my ruler and just snap it to that guideline. Okay, so even though I'm not selecting anything at that outside scale, I can still use the ruler interface, okay, to use that as my scale. Okay, so the ruler, you can see, got my guideline there, yeah. So the ruler, see how the cursor changes to the ruler? That means that I can grab that ruler, and the ruler is looking for something to snap to. And you can see all these different horizontal lines that come across that match up to various things in the artwork. But really, I created those guidelines. I can snap to those guidelines. Now when I zoom in here, I say, okay, I've got 10 feet. So my height, and I can just enter it this way, 10 feet, 9 inches. Okay, that's my overall height. Now my height of the objects here obviously will be smaller. So this will still work. So let's do that. Extract and scale. Looks like I got some extra things there, but it doesn't really affect anything. And again, here's my my points. If I want to switch those to arcs and lines, I can do that. Click on done. All right, and here's my object. Now, if you end up here and you have some extra stuff like this, I can ungroup. I'm doing U for ungroup, so I can just go like this and select this, get rid of this, and that's kind of maybe the standard way. This might be a mounting hole or something, so we can click and delete those. So sometimes it's a combination of different tools, but if I do A for group all, I've got 89 inches as my overall height. Okay, so that's a pretty good one. That's how you use the ruler interface. I want to look now at this one because this presents a bit of a different problem, which is it's a very busy file. This is ROS, a neon layout that we're going to retrofit with LEDs. So I'll do import crop on the ROS lettering, and I have a scale there of 72 inches. But import crop doesn't really isolate very well, right, on this file, because this is a very a busy file. You've got neon tubes drawn inside of there and all kinds of stuff. So so this is a great example of how the extraction tool works. So I'm just going to zoom in here, click on each outline that I want to keep. And remember, zooming in LED Wizard is right mouse button. Okay, drawing a box with the right mouse button, hold it still to zoom back out. Okay, so I've got 5 objects. I have my scale here at 72 inches. And this is actually an interesting layout in the sense that the O does not go above that guideline. So that is 72 is the actual dimension. Okay, 72 inches. Again, we don't need unexplode for this one. Extract and scale. This is clean artwork. No further editing is really needed. Click on done. Okay, that's my object, 72 inches. Okay, so again, I'm going through a number of different files just to show that the process here is consistent. And even though each of these files that I'm opening, has its own issue or is unique in some way, the procedure that I go through here is pretty consistent. So here's this is an AI file. This is a Crunch Gym or Crunch Fitness, and out of this whole thing, this little guy here is the only thing that I want. So I'll import crop onto that, and this is a cloud sign, right? So this is going to be it's going to have some face graphics, and I just want the outline of this as a cloud sign. So turns out that there's only 2 objects here that represent the outline, and so I'm going to click both of those. Actually, I didn't catch what the scale is, so I'll just make it up. 84 inches. And I'm unclicking on explode. So one way you can tell if something perhaps has exploded data is that the loop direction would be black, which represents an open loop. And further, you'd have all these what we call start endpoints or loop starts, and that's what these black boxes are. So I'll show you the next file that'll have a whole bunch of these on an object. So I don't need to do that in this case. Extract and scale. Here's my artwork. Again, I might, that's converting it to lines and arcs. That's fine. So click on done. Okay. And here's how it comes in. And this one actually requires really one more step because I want a single outline. Okay, I can just weld this, right? Welds out those internal objects. And so here's now my my overall object. Okay, so that was a pretty easy one, I guess. Let's take a look at Surf Shop, and this one is deceptively difficult because this does have exploded data. It looks like it's very simple, but actually this is very, very poor data. So each one of these points represents an individual object, okay, and it's black, which indicates that these are all open loops. In fact, as I go around here, you can see that I'm selecting different objects. I'm not selecting the entire letter, except for the F. Is the only one that's clean. So I can select this by drawing a box and highlighting everything. So I don't have to click on each individual vector. The height here is 21 inches. Okay, I am going to use exploded, and I'm going to do 0.005. And I mentioned before that we have this value. What this value means is that one point will look around for another point that it might want to connect to, and it's going to look around at a distance of 0.005 inches. It's a very small distance. A lot of times these files have the points that are coincident. They're right on top of each other. This one's not quite as clean, but I tested it before, and 0.005 is big enough to capture and connect most of these. Okay, you don't want to do too big of a value because then it gets a little bit crazy. So you want the smallest value that works. Okay, extract and scale. And you can see that there's a number of points here, but it did connect everything, and I know that because all my loops are blue and red. Okay, and I'm going to use this time. I'm going to use rasterize, vectorize, sharp. And what this tool actually does is it creates a raster version and then it re-vectorizes it. So a lot of times this can end up smoothing out and cleaning up data. It's useful if you have data where there's strokes that cross. Again, maybe they're not welded, they're just strokes that cross each other. So rasterize, vectorize is in some cases it's not as common as the other options that I've been clicking on, but in this case it actually does the best job. Okay, so that's Surf Shop. It's not great, but this is this is good enough to go into PowerFlow. Get a clean center path. This isn't a very big letter, so I can do this, in a single stroke, right? You can see the center path that's being created certainly looks smooth enough. Okay, so I mentioned before, artwork doesn't have to be perfect. Sure, the cleaner the better, right? But in this case, not perfect artwork, but certainly good enough where I can come in here and and get a clean layout. Okay, so now if I wanted to come back in and fine tune, if I wanted to make this really clean, if this again, would end up being the file that I would route from. I'd want to clean up these corners and that sort of thing. So it's your discretion as far as how much of that kind of data cleanup work that you want to do on a file like this. Okay, so that's unexploded. Generally, we dislike that kind of file because they can be pretty difficult. So what's left? So here's Pepsi. This was in my example. So again, a big title block file, an image that we don't want, import crop, comes into the data cleanup tool, and this is really not a very difficult one. This object here, all of that is a single object, and I just want this circular cabinet and the Pepsi lettering. The Pepsi happens to be a single object, and that's it. So this is 9 feet, and again, I can just put in 9 feet. I could put in inches as the native, but if I do feet, I just put a little foot sign there. Don't need to unexplode. Okay, that's it. And then this is also Bezier curves, but I might put a few more Beziers in. That's a good distribution of Bezier curves there. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. It's disappearing sometimes with colors on for some reason. I could give it a color, be able to see a little bit more. Okay. So again, if this feels repetitive, it's because I'm just trying to establish the workflow, the process for importing. If you have a file, let's go back to let's see, probably do the Pepsi one again. If you have a file that's already to scale, and no, that's not a good example. Well, yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. I was just going to say that you can bypass the tool. I guess I can do it here. You can bypass the tool. So if you don't need to scale and you don't need to select, and there's nothing that you have to do with the artwork, if you just click on the layout tool, it bypasses everything that I've been showing you and just imports whatever it is that you had in import crop. Now that means I could go in here after the fact, and I can say, well, let me delete this. Let me delete this. But really what I'm doing now is not as efficient as all the tools that I've been showing you. Well, that's why the Pepsi was disappearing, because it's colored white. So anyway, so you can bypass the tool, and by the same token, if you're importing a file into an existing layout, a layout that already has something in it, that also bypasses the tool. Okay, and you'll just go straight into it. So you don't have to go through the data cleanup tool. I know a lot of the workflows, might involve cleaning up the files in another design program before you import it in, and that's fine. If you don't need the tool, you can just click out of it. So let's look at what I think is the last one, and that's this Desert Valley radiology. And I'll just click on the Desert Valley part. And what I wanted to show on this one is that you can select by color. And if you remembered, this had the lettering was green and it had a black drop shadow. Now, if I just want to go in here and select all of the green objects, then I would hold the Alt key and click on, is that letting me do it? There we go. That's not wanting to select it for some reason. There we go. So if you hold the Alt key, that basically tells the software to select all of the objects of that particular color. And so that's what I was able to do here. So that's a little bit of a time saver if you have artwork that is, that is like that. little bit of a way to save some time. So that's that file. I've got this as 24-inch lettering, and you can see that it's green. I mentioned before about doing some vector editing. So let me do that with this file. We have about 10 minutes left here. So what I'll do to enhance the effect of what I'm showing is I'm going to change this to all lines. And I don't know why you would really do that because this is sort of what you get. But just to show how this feature works, if you've probably seen data like this, that DXF can come in like this. This is literally all lines, and we have a tool that converts to this for some reason. So if I want to smooth this out with arcs using the Alt Smoothing tool, this is how I do it. Okay, I click on, first of all, I'm in the Vector Edit tool, the second tool down. I click on this endpoint, I hold Alt, and then I click on a point further down that I want to establish as the endpoint. Okay, if I continue to hold the Alt key as I go around, I can delete points in big chunks like this, and I can create something that's very smooth. Okay, but the key to doing this successfully is not to be too crazy about the span of points that you're selecting. Okay, because you want it to approximate an arc. All right, so if I start on this endpoint and I go way over here, look what I just did. I changed the shape, and I don't want to change the shape that much. So really, as you do this, let's just go maybe here. You want to visualize arcs, right? You want to say as I go around, what looks like, and here I didn't do a very good job because I have a non-tangent point, okay? Almost tangent. So I can just edit that until it's tangent. So I'm visualizing arcs, and I'm looking to create, pretty even spacing. We'll talk about this again next week with the production edition as it relates to exporting to your channel letter bender, your automatic channel letter bender, because this is how they like to see the data, right? Clean points that are distributed, not too many points that are close together, not points that are too far away unless they're lines, right? So that is the Alt Smoothing tool, very useful tool. Now, if I had a file that came in this way, I could use, let me ungroup, actually going to break this into loops. I could use the tool, where is it? There it is, optimize vectors, okay? Optimize vectors is part of the data cleanup tool, as I showed, but it's also an individual tool. So I can go in here and I won't talk about this in a lot of detail, but there are various options here. So you can see that I didn't do a very good job because I kept these as lines. Go back in again. I want to do lines to arcs. Okay, lines to arcs. Now I've created, it's just getting worse. There we go. So my point was that you could take that original file and let's do it here again. And you could use optimize vectors. And that is, first let's make it all lines. Okay, that's my original. And with optimized vectors, you would, perhaps get a little bit of a head start here, right, on this editing. So you wouldn't have to do lines to arcs, the manual tool that I just did. That work? No. Lines to arcs. Okay. Okay. So it actually converted, took out a lot of the, replaced those lines with only a few vectors. Okay. So sometimes data cleanup is the result of multiple tools. Obviously, we want something to be as automated as possible. So it just depends on the artwork. But optimized vectors is certainly one of the tools you can use to convert. So let's see. I think that was all of the files that I had set aside. So just to review these again by the preview. So we did this one where we selected by color. The crunch job was I welded into a cloud sign and just did so that was a pretty easy one. This IMO twins was grouped oddly, although that was resolved when I imported. But again, this one you'd group separately when you go into PowerFlow. The Metro file, I used the ruler to scale and make sure that I had it to the right size. And that ruler can measure anything really. And it'll snap to objects that it sees and snap to guidelines. That's a useful tool if you don't have an overall measurement. Pepsi, pretty straightforward one, import crop, selected the two objects and scaled. Not a lot of data work was really needed on that one. The Ross, there's a fair amount of selecting and things that I needed to get rid of. So import crop is one step, and then the extraction tool to select just the letters is a second step on that one. And then Surf Shop was the one with the exploded data and connecting all of those individual vectors. So I think that's a good overview of various files and various issues. Again, you might have some files that are worse than those. Again, if you get in any trouble, you can always send them to us and ask us to help. So I wanted to reiterate the upcoming webinar schedule. So here are the topics we have coming up: production edition next week, stats and title blocks, power supply loading, vectorizing and on-screen digitizing. Week after that is Memorial Day weekend, so we might reassess and do some more in June if there's still a demand. And again, here's our contact information. So I managed to get through this whole thing without any questions. Lauren, do we have any questions from anybody on this process?
We don't. You must have nailed it this week.
Well,
if you do, please feel free to just send them over through the questions tab. And we will be following up this webinar like we do all of them with an email that will include links to all the upcoming webinars that Jeff just discussed. So know that that's coming to you guys as well.
All right, terrific. Thanks, Lauren. I'll stay on just for another second if anyone has any questions, but you can always reach out to me directly. I'm out here in Ventura, California, and this is how you can reach us. But I'm always happy to help out and do this kind of training if you're needing help, answer some questions if you have support contracts. So just contact us and let us know. Okay, well, I guess if there's no questions, thanks everyone very much. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. Stay safe and stay healthy. Take care. Bye.